Right. Looks like everyone's starting to join right now. Just give it another minute here before we get started. For those of you who just joined, it's just going to make another 30 seconds here and we'll get started while everyone's entering through the lobby. Right. I think we're good to go. So thank you everyone for joining today. Really excited today about our panelist, Evan Gitomer. Evan is the Chief Revenue Officer for Weldon, Williams, and Lick. They've been in the industry for about 126 years. Is that correct, Evan?
Yeah, we don't look a day over 124 though.
Evan's a seasoned sales professional with about 20 plus years in sales experience across a number of different professional sports and entertainment venues. And so today, really, the theme is focusing on a topic around personalization, how that impacts the sales process, both from a retention standpoint and from increasing your top of the funnel conversion. So I don't want to take too much time here. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Evan. Evan, please introduce yourself and just talk a little bit more about your story and kind of what led you to your role today.
Happy to, and thanks so much for having me, Ross. Really excited to be here today and chat for a little bit. So it makes me sound old sometimes when I go through all this stuff. I've worked in sports since 2001. So I spent the first 13 years of my career working for teams, various teams, some football teams, some basketball teams, some soccer teams, even a hockey team mixed in there as well. And that oftentimes laid on the ticket sales side of things, but pretty quickly emerged and filtered over to the premium sales side of the world. And really kind of honed in on new stadiums, new arenas, big transformations of projects, which led me to take on an opportunity to oversee the premium ticketing vertical for a company called Van Wagner, which was a third-party sales agency that would come in and help teams that were building new stadiums, new arenas, big renovation projects, handle really their premium sales side of things. So spent 7 years doing that. COVID kind of reshaped the way that company looked. So I started my own firm called the Strategic Sports Group, which again kind of served a similar role, was a little bit more boutique-y in feel than Van Wagner was, but similarly would come help teams when they're going through these big major revenue shifts. And then more recently, as you mentioned, a couple of years ago, I took on the responsibility of stepping into what was and continues to be the best printing company in the world for tickets. The challenge is that people don't really print tickets all that much anymore. And in many instances, we also believe they shouldn't. So we've kind of had to revisit how we can provide value to people that we've supported for so many years, and things like access control, commemoratives, gifting platforms, and ways to just drive that fan experience that they have with their audience. So that's the high and dry on me.
No, thanks for sharing. And kind of like going into the theme of today with how the sales in these entertainment and sports venues has evolved, like from everything you're saying from printing tickets to digital tickets, but now actually talking about the tangible sales process, like starting kind of with your first stint in the industry working for the Eagles to now, like let's zoom out for a second from a macro standpoint. Like how has not only sales, but premium sales changed in the industry from when you first started? And are those changes league specific, or are they pretty holistic in how they impact all those different categories?
So it's interesting. So when I was first starting with the Eagles, so I worked on the sales team that sold Lincoln Financial Field, which again makes me feel a little bit old because that building's been open for 20 plus years at this point. But what we did is we had a whole bunch of suites and a whole bunch of club seats, and that was still kind of a new concept for people. So the idea of getting into a suite or getting into what many people called skyboxes back then, just because that's the name that was used at Madison Square Garden, kind of when the first suites started to roll out, it just kind of it had a mystique to it. So there wasn't quite as much need to really get deep and detailed into the process of finding the right reasons and the right way that someone would want to leverage having that space and owning that real estate. So it was really more of a macro thing, right? If you could come out there and you could just have a few business points and come up with a couple use cases for people to do something in that space and then create a decent experience on top of it, you could sell a decent number of club seats and a decent number of suites. I think there was a big shift back in 2007, 2008. Strangely enough, that's when all the financial stuff and a lot of the housing market crisis stuff kicked in, really changed the economics of the country. At that point, I was the first suite sales manager for Barclays Center in Brooklyn, and it really shifted the way things felt in that environment. It was already a challenging place to operate, and in Brooklyn, we were probably the ninth most important team in town. Again, we were the New Jersey Nets at that point, trying to shift over and move to Brooklyn. The Knicks were a lot more important. The football teams, the baseball teams, everybody else was more important. Plus, we really didn't have a lot of trust in what we were doing, just because it had taken so long for the building to come together. So we really had to lean in very, very heavily to the personalization of selling and managing and operating the space that we were selling at that point and then intended to open. Just because, again, we were an afterthought's probably overselling a little bit. I mean, it was a very big project, very cool project, but you definitely had to compete with many, many other venues that, again, could be more important, but then also were open at the same time. At that point, Madison Square Garden was doing a major renovation, the Yankee Stadium, the New Jersey Devils, the New York Red Bulls. There was a lot of competition for potential buyers, so you really had to lean in heavier to how do we differentiate both from a selling perspective and then also how do we sell that through from the experience perspective and what that'll look like when people actually interact and engage with our venue. So again, I think that was my real dip into trying to challenge ourselves to be more specialized and more personalized. And I do think coming out of that financial situation, organizations got a lot more just a lot more risk averse, I think is probably the safest way to put it, or where you used to just have one CEO or one high level executive come down and say, yeah, I want that suite. Like I remember in Philadelphia, we even had some admins come down and just pick out a suite and they say, oh, my boss said, yeah, take the checkbook and go have some fun, pick the best spot for us. We really had to dig in deeper and understand everything that was going on with that company, because now all of a sudden that executive wanted to walk into the boardroom after they said, oh, we made this suite purchase, and explain to the rest of their executive team why it happened. They had a lot of people kind of with eyes that were a little bit more judging than they would have been in the past when something like that happened. So they really need to have more of a use case for why this made sense. Um, Evolving past that, I think that COVID and COVID obviously flipped a whole bunch of things on their head. And we were already starting to see a few components of this starting to come into play. But what to me happened a lot during COVID is people started to accumulate more individual wealth. Now, again, in certain specific markets, like for example, when I was in Orlando with the Magic, we didn't have a lot of corporate dollars to go around. There's the big tourist destinations. You have your Disney World, you have your Universal Studios. You have a couple big companies, but you don't have that girth of Fortune 500s that you'd find in New York or LA or Dallas or Atlanta. So you had to lean a little bit heavier and find some more personalized use cases for things. And I think COVID really amplified that in other markets as well. So all of a sudden, whereas you used to be able to specialize or personalize something that would have to fit a company, and they would, let's say the CEO is a huge basketball fan, right? And you're getting a suite or club seats for a basketball team. That's great. And you want to try to make that person feel wonderful about it. But at the same time, they're thinking just as much about what their clients are going to think about that. Right. So it's also like, you can personalize to a certain extent. You can personalize the sales process, probably more so to help sell that person through. But the experience on the back end of it had to be a little bit more vanilla, just because you have different people coming and using that particular space on different nights. What happened in my mind and what we've seen, this is the consulting time for me, or this is even thinking about some of the things we do at WW&L, we've had to gear ourselves more toward individuals with high levels of wealth and what they want that experience to be. Because what people have done is they've accumulated a lot of stuff. They're now spending it on all these premium spaces. And you see arenas and you see teams adjusting from having tons of suites like they would have in the early 2000s. Spaces are a lot smaller, they're more personalized. They include more things. There's more events that happen outside of just a sporting event or a concert. to make these things worthwhile. And to me, that really speaks to the personalization that's looking to take place.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And it sounds like, I mean, the two common themes there, both competition and kind of external factors that forced you to be a bit more personalized. And I think what would be really helpful is talking on specifics of that a little bit more. So, like when we talk
Yeah.
about personalization, you kind of alluded to this already, is it the personalization of the sales process? Is it the personalization of the products you're delivering? What's in the suite? Like, give me a couple of examples of kind of how you leverage this concept of personalization in both your sales and service process.
So one of the things we did, and then this one's a little bit more recent in nature, but one of the things when I launched that boutique sports agency is we went and we started to help some individuals or companies leverage the premium assets that they have. And it was very interesting because again, I'm used to sitting on the opposite side of the table from my past experience. I'm the one selling into these companies. All of a sudden, I found myself sitting across from these teams. Um, and trying to help these organizations make the most of their premium spend. It was crazy to hear some of the things they cared about. Like I had one organization that their founder is it's funny. He had football tickets, and his favorite thing to do was to go down on the field pregame and hold the flag, for the national anthem. Thought that was the coolest thing in the world, right? So like if that ever was pulled back from him, that moment in time would have really impacted his decision on whether or not he should buy premium seats anymore or if he should walk away from that and try to use his money elsewhere, right? And that's not anything that you would normally think about, but when you start to get super granular in that space and you start to think about this person, they may run this through a business, and this has happened for a while, and people still, for tax purposes, oftentimes do try to run their purchase through a business. But it's really him personally making the decision on whether or not he wants to buy those things. And something like that guest experience and knowing the waitress are having a killer experience when he comes into the club space where his tickets were was more important than anything else that possibly could have been done for him. Uh, at WW&L, we're doing a whole bunch of things around gifting for a lot of these spaces, and it's really been kind of fun for us to, again, we're 126 years old, so we've had to evolve quite a bit over 126 years, not just over the past, let's call it decade and a half, as people have gone away from printing tickets and leaned heavier into digital tickets. But it's been amazing to see how important it has been for people to personalize what that gifting experience could be. All right. I was just on a panel at a conference about a month and a half ago talking about how a bunch of different people had come up with these really amazing gifts that they were going to give out to suite holders. And it wasn't resonating to the level they thought it would. They were super expensive, top end brand gifts, but they weren't resonating in the way that they hoped. And part of the problem is because those people could buy those, right? It's really the personalization of that experience. Like for example, at WW&L, we've been doing some on-site activation of gifting. So it's not just you showing up in your suite, getting whatever the fanciest Apple Watch or whatever technology piece you're going to get is. It's how do we get it there and then how we personalize it or customize it on site for you. So that's really started to resonate quite a bit.
Got it. So it's really about like almost that level of last minute customization. It's not the product itself, but it's how it's kind of presented to you to make it
Yeah.
feel special.
Well, and a lot of these changes have taken place, right, over the years, and whether that's the sales process or it's the digital component of so much of what we do, whether it's ticketing or the geofencing and all the other things that go about us knowing so much more about the customers that we have.
Mhm.
uh, it really puts the onus on us, and both through the sales process, but then also on the back end of that and fulfilling what was actually sold, to make sure that we're using that data to our benefit, right? How do we make sure that that data can create that unique customized experience? That's what everybody else is experiencing out in the world, right? Like if I pull up my Amazon app right now, there's going to be 50 items that are listed for me that are based on my past history, my order history and what I just ordered a water filter. I'm sorry, I'm from Philadelphia. Occasionally my accent comes out. I'm ordering a water filter for my fridge and it's there, right? And Amazon's reminding me that 3 months ago I bought it and these things are supposed to last 3 months. I should probably buy another one, right? Or, I bought things for my kids, and last year I bought a bunch of things because their birth, my oldest son's birthday is in September. So like, what have I gotten for him in September already? So again, it's helping to to make our lives easier. And I think we need to remember that both selling and servicing people, because that's what they're experiencing in all other parts of their life. And if we can't match and mirror that, it's going to kind of put us behind the eight ball in terms of the level that we can get to, and how we can engage with our people to a level where they keep coming back and doing business with us.
And how are you collecting? Like how have you seen best practices in terms of like getting that very specific data points? Like in terms of like, I mean, things like birthdays from people that aren't the person that's putting pen to paper for the suite, or preferences. Like, are these things that you're just having guest experience associates going out and just asking questions and kind of mirroring what they hear and then putting that to practice? Or are you using different data sources from various technologies that your guests use to be able to kind of predict what they want and kind of add that level of personal touch?
Yeah. The birthday thing's been going on for a long time, right? There's always been the reason to go find someone's birthday. That always feels like the easiest one. Uh, I would love to say that there's one source of technology that solved this riddle for everybody, and I haven't found that quite yet. So what I've found, and again, not just things that we've done ourselves or I've done personally, but also just doing due diligence to kind of learn best practices. Uh, I find the people that do this best are the ones that empower their team to take steps to make the experience more personalized. So example of this would be, someone found out that a suite holder's son was getting married, right? They found that out. They came back. They found the registry for this person, and they went and bought the most expensive gift they could, right? That suite goes for $200,000 a year. It's on a 5-year commitment. So it's $1 million just to keep the math easy, right? To go spend $300 on a wedding gift. Uh, that's insanely personalized. It hits on so many different levels. And it was all because they empowered their team member to make that determination. So again, there's good technology. There's a lot of ways that people are being tracked. There's ticket usage. There's social media obviously plays a role in this. You can also just Google people and find out all kinds of crazy stats and things that are going on. But really, to me, when you have all these different touch points, you have all these different people who interact and engage with the people we're trying to keep happy, and again, trying to keep as customers, empowering the staff and making them understand that this is our goal, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is how we're selling, and in turn, this is how we're going to have to actually keep that customer happy. To me, that provides the value and really starts to create that special sense of inclusion and makes us stickier, right? Makes it hard to
Yeah.
get away.
No, that makes sense. And you've already kind of touched on this, but of course, like if you have a $300 gift for a 200,000, a year suite, I mean, the math makes sense on there from a retention strategy. But in terms of, I would say, more costly initiatives on the angle of personalization, like how are you justifying whether they're infrastructure based personalizations or gifting? How do you go back to who's ever in charge of that budget and start rationalizing the ROI, both from a customer retention standpoint or a new member activation standpoint?
Yeah. You know what? There's a couple stats that have started to pop up over, let's say, the past decade that I think have been super helpful for people that are in those spots where they need to prove that there's value behind what we're doing. So the one that I used to lean on a lot earlier in my career was always the cost of acquisition of a customer, right? It's crazy to see, and I always use the example when I'm talking to people these days of and I know it's not legal throughout the country, but you see these sports betting legalities coming up in different states, and then you see all these ads, and you see all these banners popping up all over stadiums and signs going up on outfield walls and things like that to try to acquire new customers. Because what makes it valuable to a company like that, or what that customer is worth to that person, makes the spend worthwhile, right? So that to me was always the one piece that I always leaned into. But the other part that I've spent a lot more time and put a lot more attention toward more recently is just the lifetime value of customers. I think the reporting against the lifetime value of customers has gotten a lot better. I think the data points are all rolling up into better places, whether that's the ticket purchasing data or the merchandise purchasing data, and where we start to marry these things together. I'd love to see all the data scientists that are ending up in front offices all over the country, really throughout the world for teams throughout the world. Because again, when you start to take all that data and prove what the value of that person is through their lifetime, that makes it a whole lot easier to say, you know what, we need to create um, that gifting platform for this group, or we need to empower our staff and tell them that, you know, if it's less than $500, just go do it if you think it's going to drive the right result. Or even if it means going back and looking at your building and reanalyzing what your building looked like, right? Thinking through renovations, like what type of amenities actually make sense? What do people actually need? What type of food service has to be there? So how do we have to program kitchens or servers or things like that? Like there's to me, when you start to analyze those two things, so again, cost of customer acquisition and just the lifetime value of that person, it does become a whole lot easier.
Interesting. And could you, if you were to kind of distill, I know every stadium is personalized, like in terms of their fan base, like I would say Texas Rangers fan base, not the same as the Boston Red Sox, as the Los Angeles Rams. So,
Mhm.
but if you look about this kind of in aggregate, what do you see kind of as the best bang for your buck personalization initiatives throughout your career?
You know what? I think so. I've had the joy of working on the two most recent ballparks that have opened. So the Atlanta Braves and the Texas Rangers, and was really very involved in the creation of what those premium spaces would look like. So getting with architects and helping draw and design with working with concessionaires and making sure kitchens are located in the right place so you can get the right service things in place. Um, I think the best bang for your buck to me still involves the entirety of the experience of leaving your home, getting to a venue, having like the food and beverage experience that you expect or hope to expect, that's paramount or that's top notch, and then the ease of getting out, right? So if you can make the experience for when you leave your couch, the time you get back to your couch, feel fantastic, to me, that's the best way to, again, being agnostic to what specific preferences are there for specific people. I still think that's the part that has the best overall value. Um, so to me, that again, like all the other little odds and ends and making sure that you show up with the person's favorite flavor ice cream and their sweet or there's balloons there when it's someone's birthday. Like those things are all great and wonderful, but where you do it consistently every single time there's an event, I think just focusing and honing in on what can happen from the time you leave to the time you get back.
Got it. And so, and would you say that that's more of an ROI standpoint from like a retention of your premium customers? Are there, but like when you kind of take personalization and that
Yep.
paradigm, are there initiatives like more like focused on personalization that you see as kind of having the best ROI, like in addition to like providing a comprehensive,
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
yeah,
so a little bit more granular. Sorry,
yeah,
I may have misread your prior question. So, yeah, I think that on-site activation to me really is when done properly isn't all that expensive. So, you don't have huge return on it, but it always feels different, right? So oftentimes we're dealing with people that can buy anything we possibly can give them, right? But what we can't do is we can't create that specialized item that is just unique and different. So, to use a WW&L example, there was just a football team that did a trip for their customers to an away game, right? And they had the team playing and everything like that, but which is great and amazing. But what they started to do is they started to customize and personalize what that experience would be like. So they custom created tickets. Again, they couldn't use them to get in because it's all digital, but it creates that memory where everyone waiting in their seat when they got on the plane had this commemorative piece that was for their specific seat in that venue. Not that expensive, right? But it creates that lasting memento and that lasting memory. And again, that's just the reminder that's always there for people. Uh, I was also at the Formula One race, this in the Paddock Club down in Miami this past May. They had someone in there just doing these personalized bracelets, right? They're just these really thin gold bracelets. And it's like, that's very, very interesting. But their line was backed up forever, and people were missing race time to just get these personalized bracelets, which again didn't have that much. I mean, they weren't crazy. They were, I actually wish I knew and went up and figured out what karat gold they were. I think it was 14 karat gold, but they were so thin, the actual weight made them relatively cheap. But again, it was something personal to them. It was different. It was unique. and something that couldn't be replicated. So I always look for those things that cannot be, they're one of ones basically.
Yeah. And what's interesting is actually, I think it was yesterday with Shea Otani here in Los Angeles, there were people waiting 7 hours for a bobblehead of his before the game. And just because that's a unique piece that they could only get there and nowhere else. So that gold bracelet anecdote really rings true to like what just happened in the news yesterday.
Yep.
Uh, so yeah, before we get to questions, kind of my final question here, and you've alluded to this a little bit already, is what would you say are kind of the 1 to 2 simple things that operators and sales reps can put into practice tomorrow that really touch on this theme of personalization and being able to drive that ROI value for their premium customers and sales?
Yeah. Well, I think it's as crazy as it sounds. I mean, it kind of just comes back to the word, right? How do you personalize the interaction with that person, right? The way that you engage with each particular guest. Again, we're thinking about our highest end guest, the one that have the most return.
Mhm.
But how do you make it so that you are interacting with them and you're engaging with them on the things that matter most to them, right? So how do you get to a place where it doesn't matter that the score was XYZ or the chicken fingers were cold and the sweet that day. If that doesn't matter and it's just this person cared only about getting on the field to hold the flag for the game, like make your conversation about what's most important to them. So that would be one. And the second, I think, is just empowerment, right? Like I've always believed that you hire great people and you give them the space they need to execute, right? So I think that if we empower the people that we have in place and we let them help drive the interaction and engagement we have with every unique customer, that to me makes us a better overall operation, right? And if we can't get people that can help do that, they may just not be in the perfect role. So
And I mean, that's a great bridge kind of between this webinar and the last webinar with Philip Hastings, who really emphasized that component. And I think Philip is on here. So Philip, thank you for that insight. And yeah, it's definitely a common thematic element as we kind of move through talent and even through the sales process. So we're going to jump to questions really quick. So we already have one on the line. Question for you, Evan. So have you seen 24 compared to 23? Is the market still booming since COVID, or are things slowing down? Are ticket prices still rising year over year? And if so, how much? So part one, are things slowing down? Or are they still in the boom since COVID?
well, I still, I mean, it depends on what we're looking at, right? So, I mean, there's still growth in a lot of sports leagues. It's certainly year over year has felt like concerts have slowed down. I've seen some metrics that concerts and touring has slowed down ever so slightly. Um, it would have been tough to keep all that pent up demand in place forever. But I do still see prices and demand increasing for these super hyper unique premium experiences. And whether that's sports events, concerts, food and wine type functions, high-end dinners, like there still is that demand and there still is that desire to pay more for things that are considered luxury. And again, that speak more to uh, an individual's likes and desires.
Got it. And then what about ticket prices? Are they rising? I know they kind of shift with supply and demand here, but are they getting more expensive as everything is getting more expensive, or have they stayed relatively stable since COVID?
Well, I think ticket prices are growing as well, right? And part of that is if you start to create the right experience, then you can go in there and start to charge more for it, right? I mean, again, I mentioned briefly about some of those baseball stadiums I just worked on. So much time was spent on creating the right environment that could drive the right ticket price. So
Hmm.
again, if you get access to do things that you couldn't do before and it's worth more money to you, then you're willing to pay that. And I do think I don't know if it's just ticket prices going up, but I feel like we as an industry are doing a better job of starting to program in the right things that can demand more money for the experience that we're providing.
Got it. Got it. So we're at time. If anyone has another question, feel free to throw that in there and we might have time. In the meantime, one question that I've been really curious about also is kind of like future looking. What do you kind of see as being I don't know, a technique or a technology piece that's really going to transform the premium experience more so than it is currently?
Well, I mean, the easy answer, because it's the answer to everything, right, is probably AI, right? Like all the different things you can learn and all the different things you can experience through that. I was having debate with a former colleague recently about the number of sales and service people you're going to need in 5 years compared to what you need now. And uh, let me think about this from a percentage standpoint because we were looking at an audience of well, I said it would probably be about 75% less. He argued 60. But again, I think so many of these things can be handled. And when you start to think about personalization, and as soon as we continue to feed enough data into the machine, we can do a very good job of handling a lot of these touch points, a lot of this specialization and personalization through artificial intelligence. So, if we can be in a place where we can know more about our guests and we can provide that information to the people who can impact their experience, um, and that's either through the selling process or through the end experience after they're sold and attending our events. To me, that's how you personalize. That's how you do a great job of it, and I'm eager to see how some tools can help continue to allow us to do that even better.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, even on our end, we're leveraging those tools to speed things up. So I
Yeah.
definitely see that impacting the industry. Um, Evan, thank you so much for this time. I really enjoyed this conversation. For everyone that's on the line, thank you for joining. We'll share out a recording of this as well. So if you want to share it with your colleagues, feel free to do so, and we'll send that over. So
Yeah.
again, thank you for joining. Evan, thank you for the time, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ross.
Take care.